Okay, good morning everyone. So today's session is going to be a little special. Okay, we're going to make things a little different. Let me jump through the slides first. I have a few announcements to make, and then we'll jump into the preparation pretty much for the next IE. So a few quick announcements. So it's kind of a recap. Okay, PLQ1. So I would say about 5 to 7% of students experience some form of technical problem of ANOVA during PLQ1. Okay? It's not as good as I hoped it would be. It's not as bad as I was afraid it would be. So hopefully going forward, we all learn some things. So I want to recap on this slide a few things, okay? First, the deadline for step 2, since I had to push deadline from step 1, I didn't specify a deadline for step 2 yet. Try to finish it before tomorrow. Okay, and that's fine. If you already finished it, you're perfect. You're fine. We are going to soon have another PLQ. 2 students have asked already if this was it for the PLQ. No, it's not it. There's going to be several other PLQ during the semester, and altogether, they are going to make up your 10% for that grade. Now, a few students also, it's not in the slide, but a few students also mentioned, I had this and this and this technical problem. So there are things for which we can easily make up for a grade, etc., like medical problems, psychological problems, a car accident, etc. There are other things, like, for example, I've been very busy this week. It's not fair to actually grant somebody a retake of anything just because they've been busy during that week. Because then everybody else can argue, I was pretty busy too, and I didn't ask for a retake, and I didn't get a chance to do better, okay? So I want to help every one of you, but I want to also keep things fair for everybody. So my plan for PLQ, if some of you had problems, you could not participate, etc., my plan for PLQ right now is to set Canvas to drop the worst PLQ grade overall the semester, okay? So that means that if everybody gets one, if you had a problem that cannot be documented, it cannot be serious enough between quotes, to warrant a retake, then you will not have to fear for your grade at the end of the semester. So we're going to try to go with this. The PLQ follow closely the lecture, okay? Maybe that was not evident with the first one because the first one was kind of a test, but the same way that the GQs are following very closely the reading assignment, the PLQ will be more focused on the lecture. So just so that you know that going forward. Couple of advice for the next PLQ. Some of the problems that we encountered were due to people who clicked on different buttons, to try out stuff. So there's nothing wrong with trying out buttons if the buttons are there. They should react positively being clicked, or at least they should have some sort of safety built in. For now, I'm just going to ask you, if we are taking a PLQ quiz in this class, just open the PLQ quiz. There's no evidence right now, there's no hard evidence that trying the demo quizzes that are also embedded in the system when you are a student is causing any trouble, but I'm trying to rule out any other possibility, okay, any other factor. Once you submitted step 1, one thing that caused not a lot of problem but a lot of question, once you submit step 1, even if you submit it, 1 minute before the deadline, don't expect step 2 to open right away, okay? A few students were surprised and told me, I opened step 1, took step 1, then I wanted to get rid of step 2, right then, and I could not. Yes, it's because we have a deadline for step 1, and step 2 is not going to start before that deadline is over. The reason for that being that we are waiting for everybody to actually contribute to step 1, and then we are going to shuffle around those justifications, redistribute them, okay? Once step 2 has been released, I already mentioned that one. Once step 2 has been released, it's too late to go back and participate to step 1, okay? So we're going to have to find a way for everybody who wants to participate to be able to make it through the deadline to step 1. Unfortunately, that kind of quiz is a little bit tighter on the deadline than the GQs or PQs or something like that due to its very nature, okay? Other question that is not on the slide, it's not really a question, it's more an issue, and I'm going to take maybe a few days to think about it and try to address it. A few students, at least 2 students, brought up by Canvas messages that they didn't find the justification from their peers very useful. So I don't know how many in this room are in this situation. How many of you took PLQ step 2, read the justification from the peers, and that really didn't do anything for you? Okay. Yeah, you don't have to be like afraid or anything. You're not hurting my feeling or anything like that. Okay, I'm going to probably do a quick informal anonymous survey to see exactly how this is working out. Okay. Bottom line is that you are going to be graded also on your justification. So there is an incentive there for you to try to provide decent justification. For example, there were mentioned that some of the justification are I don't know, or just blank, or just, like this is not the right answer. Well, again, this is totally useless. I entirely agree with you, okay? So give me time, because I'm going to have to grade this by hand. So give me time to dig into the system to see exactly how bad the damage is in terms of how many points people are scoring for their justification. If really the exercise is not working out, then we should have very low grade in the justification. And then I will, if necessary, follow up with an anonymous survey to see just, what are you guys experiencing with that. But I'll make sure that it's anonymous so that you don't feel, like uncomfortable saying what you think. Okay. All right, that's it for the public service announcements. Now, this is a shortened list. I removed the top 3 of the practice exercise for this module. We should be at the point where you are comfortable doing everything but that part in red. We have never done that together yet. So those of you who have been doing the reading assignment a little ahead of the curve, I know that some of you like to do that. That's actually a very good idea. You have already seen that we can subclass, we can inherit from not only our own custom classes, but other classes from the system. For example, array list. So we are going to do an example of that together, either today at the end of the session or next session, depending on how fast things are going. Okay? Once we are done doing an example of this, we will have covered everything that was in those practice exercises. Now, for the rest of the module, I'm going to introduce a few more practice exercises. So those are going to be focused on the second half of the module, polymorphism, dynamic binding, stuff that we have not yet introduced. If you need extra practice, here are just some ideas. We have right now an ongoing example where we have books, ebooks, audiobooks, okay? And we have a main class that is just creating a few objects of class books, a few objects of class ebooks and audiobooks, okay? If you need a little bit more practice on array list, and array list will definitely be at the next IE, okay? There is going to be an array list to make and to manage. So if you need a little bit more practice about with array list, what I would suggest you do is you take that ongoing example that we have, and you add a few array lists in the main. One array list for the ebooks, one array list for the books, one array list for the audiobooks, which is pretty much what we are going to do right now. But we are going to do it today in live coding as a separate class. We are going to create a class playlist that's just meant to play audiobooks, okay? To list audiobooks, to contain only audiobooks. But if you want to go ahead and in the main just create a few array lists like that just to practice with it, that's a good idea to do so. And it's going to have an added advantage that when we do the live coding together, and I do that playlist class, and then later in the second half of module 3, when we introduce polymorphism into it, you are going to be able to really understand, what's the difference between, for example, having 3 different array lists, one for the books, one for the ebooks, one for the audiobooks, and then using polymorphism to actually make one array list that can contain any sort of book, ebook, audiobook. Okay? So it's going to give you a more like hands-on feel for what I'm going to explain after in the next part of the module. Yeah?
Is there any way that you can make an array list with 2-dimensional, like a standard array?
That you can make an array list of what? Sorry, I didn't catch that.
A 2-dimensional array list?
Yeah, you can make a 2-dimensional array list. I mean, think about it. What you specify as concrete type, okay? So the parameter between the angular bracket. You say it's going to be a data type. Okay, what kind of data type? A reference data type. No primitive allowed, okay? What is an array of something? It's a reference data type. What is an array list of something? It's a reference data type. So you could have an array list that contains references to whatever you want. For example, reference to an array of int. It's kind of like we are mixing and matching, right? We are mixing array list with regular arrays. So array list of reference with regular array of primitive data type, but it's feasible. You could have an array list that contains also an array list. So each element in the array list is a reference to an object of class array list itself, which contains a bunch of reference that can be referenced to whatever you want, okay, including another array list. So that would be how you go about doing multidimensional array list, pretty much. Okay, it scales up ad infinitum or ad nauseam, whatever you prefer. All right. Last remark. That's what we are going to do today. So I mentioned on Piazza, bring your laptop today. We're going to try to do something different hands-on. If you don't have your laptop, try to follow along with your classmate, or you can also write things on paper, okay? That's going to work just as well. But the bottom line is that I would like to use this session to try to merge two things. One, the fact that I've been releasing a sort of fake exam regularly for you to practice on. And the second thing I want to merge into that is the fact that we have been doing live coding before every major exam, okay? So what we're going to do today, pretty much, is I'm going to work with you through what could be our next exam. So I'm going to give you the instruction like step by step. We're going to set a timer for like, let's say 5 minutes for you to have a, it's not that you are going to necessarily have time to finish. Not all of you will finish in 5 minutes, but it's that you have enough time to think about it, get yourself in the problem and start to pretty much feel the burn, right? Feel the problems that are there, the things that you don't know, and have an opportunity to ask questions. So while you are doing those little test runs there for 5 minutes, 10 minutes at a time, okay, I'm going to circulate through the room. You ask me any question you have. It doesn't matter, you know, how back in the chapters or something like that. And we're going to use that as a preparation together. As usual, your feedback is more than welcome, okay? All right. So let's close the slides for now. We are done for now with those. We are going to jump into our code. So if you go on Canvas, and let's make sure that that part is there already. If you go on Canvas under the header for today's lecture, you should have a file called M3L5 review starter file.java. Feel free to rename that to something shorter, by the way. I would like you to download it first. So as soon as one of you is able to download it, please, give me a thumbs up or something like that so that I know there are no technical problems. You already downloaded it? Okay, cool. All right. Perfect. So a bit of warning. I took some liberty, as I do when I do live coding. I took some liberty when I wrote the instruction. What I have right here is exactly the same file that you guys have downloaded. I have a new version of the file where I only changed the description here and I put more details. I'm going to upload that as soon as I have a chance today, okay? So you won't have to change anything in the code, but let's say later this afternoon, this evening, after the office hours, if you go on Canvas, you're going to be able to download a version with much more detailed instruction. So as you continue and finish up this exercise on your own, right, you're going to have those instructions to help you know exactly what has to be done. But for the beginning, it's not a big problem because I'm going to be here and I'm going to explain to you exactly what we are trying to do. So let me start with, while you guys are downloading the file, opening it up and stuff like that, let me start by giving you the gist of this assignment. So the idea here is we want to write an audiobooks playlist class. So we are going to add one more class to our mix. If you take a look at the current file that you have downloaded, you are going to see that we have a main. And inside the main, we have sections that are commented. So the first section that is not commented, just create books and audiobooks objects, a bunch of them. And then the first section that is commented, as the system.out.println here indicates, is going to test this audiobook playlist class. So when we are ready, once we have that class written, or at least a little bit written, we are going to progressively increment here those tests that are going to run through it, okay? Well, these are not really tests, but there's code that uses it. And then we are going to do another version of the audiobooks playlist, okay? That subclass of audiobook playlist is going to allow us to have access to a few additional features. For example, we are going to be able to say, I want to have the total duration by a certain narrator. So you know that audiobooks have a narrator field, okay? the person who did the voice narration. They have the duration. So as we put more audiobooks in a playlist, the first playlist class is going to allow us to keep track of the total duration. And we are going to do that in one way. We're going to make sure that every time we add something, that something updates our total duration attribute. So that's one way to do things. The second class, this class that is a subclass of playlist audiobook, is going to actually do the same thing because it inherits it. But in addition, it's going to have an additional method that allows us to query pretty much the list of audiobooks and say, well, what about you compute on the fly for me the total duration of all the audiobooks that match a certain criteria? And that criteria would be the name of a narrator. So that's the scope that I'm hoping to wrap up in today's session. Okay, we're going to see once again how fast we can go. There's one more thing that I want to add to that. When I mentioned the practice exercise, I said we have not been inheriting from array list yet. Well, that's a good time to do it, I think. So the last class that we're going to write in this exercise, it's not in this instruction yet, but we'll finish it. We'll finish this assignment with that. The last class we're going to write in this exercise is going to be another version of audiobooks playlist. But that version is not going to contain a playlist, which is what we have been doing until now. Every time we use a playlist, that means we have an attribute of type array list of something. Okay? This time we are not going to contain the attribute that represents the playlist. We are going to inherit from the array list class. And I'm going to show you how it's done. Okay, we're going to try our hands at it. I'm pretty sure that a good portion of you, I don't know how much, but a significant portion of you would be able to implement it just by minimal trial and error. Because it's really a straight application of what we have learned to do with inheritance. It's just applied in a weird and different context. So for those of you who would be thrown off by that weird and different context, don't worry, we're going to do it together as well. But you are going to see how, once you get over it, how simple it is, and all the, how to say, possibilities that inheritance really opens up for your classes. All right, so enough chit chat. Let's get started. So we're going to fix ourselves a first milestone. So we want to create a class audiobooks playlist. So let's add it at the end of this file. Okay, so each of you, please get started, add this class at the end of this file. Don't make it public, otherwise it's not going to compile. And we want a few attributes in there. So I didn't give you the data type of the attribute. And while I'm not going to do that as the next exam, by the time the final exam rolls in, it's possible that I'm not going to specify the data type when they are quote-unquote obvious, okay? So for example here, can we figure out those data types together? We have an attribute total duration, the duration of all audiobooks in the playlist. If I want it to be safe, I would put that as a, any suggestion? As private, yep, okay, private definitely. So visibility modifier private, okay? And then what about the data type? Int. That's what I would use, okay? That's what I used actually when I wrote this thing. But actually, after I use an int, I've told myself, you're not playing it safe. Because I don't know how big this duration can get. Maybe somebody is going to have a playlist of, 50 audiobooks, and that's okay. Another one is going to have a playlist of 500 audiobooks. I don't know why, I don't know how, but, I allow it to happen. So just to be safe, I would put a long, okay? But again, you can use the same argument to tell me, well, a long that can run out as well, etc., okay? But you are trying to find a trade-off here, so let's use a primitive data type. Let's not use big integer, but let's use something like a long, for example, that should cover us for anything. And then we have another attribute list, and that's supposed to represent the list of audiobooks object. If I give you this without context, that could be anything. That could be an array, that could be something we resize by hand. Because we are learning to use array list, and I told you since we started using them that we're going to reuse them over and over again, then let's make it an array list of audiobooks. So if you look at the file, inside this file we have the main, then we have the class book, we have the class audiobook, and then that's it. I removed the class ebook just because we didn't need to carry it along, in the file for the specific example. So go ahead, implement that new class, implement those two attributes. With the way we're going to work through that, give me like a thumbs up when you're done. Okay, when it's compiling, running, everything is okay, give me a thumbs up so that I get a good feel about when everybody is ready to move to the next step. And meanwhile, I'm going to circulate real quick to see if there are any questions. That step should be relatively easy, okay? But if you have any questions, please ask them now. So you don't have to put anything into the directory. Okay? You need to put the class after the end of the class. Okay? So you're going to start by saying class service. Yeah, completely at the end of the file. It's a separate class. Each class is like a block, like that one I told you about. So you're going to say you private. You say class service, perfect. You don't do private. We don't have argument for class, we have argument for class as well. And then you open and close your curly brace. Okay. Yeah, it's very good. So that's the syntax just to say, hey, I'm going to tell you what the class attribute previous looks like. Okay? And now what we want inside, we want two attributes. So when you say long, total duration, yeah, this is where it would go. And then the list, you declare it as well. Total duration, and then so how do you say this? The syntax may be the rule, right? If you have problem remembering the syntax, don't hesitate to ask me, okay? The what here, the superclass is a attribute. Okay? It doesn't find a figure constructor in attribute. So the way to fix it is going to be super simple actually. We are not going to extend the attribute. We are not trying to make a subclass of attribute yet. Okay? We are making a playlist subclass that's going to be standalone. And then later we're going to make a subclass of that playlist subclass. Not to extend the audiobook, but to extend your playlist. Okay. So this is looking pretty good. Sometimes a little bit rusty with the syntax, but that's exactly what the hands-on stuff is going to do to you. So when you feel rusty about syntax like that, don't hesitate, do more exercise. I guarantee you, after you do 5 exercises where you use array list, you're going to have automatic memory of how to declare, how to use an array list. Okay, so this is good stuff. In the meantime, for today's session, if you are falling short on syntax, please don't hesitate to ask so that I can save you time. Okay, so let's take a look together at what we are going to do here. So I want the version of, I'm talking to myself here because I'm looking at different versions. Okay, I want the base version of this class. So, all right, let's go. So I'm going to just define it as class, okay, not public class, because there can be only one public class in my file. So it's going to be audiobooks playlist. There we go. And class audiobooks playlist. The comment is not mandatory, it's just a good idea. Okay, and now what I need to do is my 2 attributes. So let's start with the total duration, I think we called it. So I'm going to make all my attributes private, by the way. Again, nobody told me otherwise. So I'm going to always lock down everything, and later on, if I realize that I was too strict, then I will let loose a little bit. So private, I think we said we were going to go for a long, and the name of the attribute was total duration. Yeah, total duration. There we go. First attribute. Second attribute, let's go. Private is going to be called list. But that attribute has a different syntax to declare because it's an array list. So array list of, and it's audio book. Oops, there we go. So again, I don't do this. I don't do this because these attributes are not static. If they were static, I would initialize them right there on the spot. Okay? They are not static attributes, therefore I'm going to do the initialization inside the constructor. So there we go. Let's compile this. It compiles. I'm not using the class yet because I don't have a constructor, I don't have anything, but at least my syntax for declaring the 2 attribute is okay. So let's see what we have next. So next we are going to have a few methods. Let me scroll back up. There we go. We want the following method, and there is one that is missing here that I have added to the instruction that I will upload probably later today. We want an add method. Okay. We want something that allows us to add an audiobook to the playlist. Without that, our playlist would be pretty bloody useless. But before we do that, we are going to do our constructors. Now, the constructors are not even specified here. Is that a problem? Yes and no. It's one of those, I'm assuming that you know already pretty much what we're doing here. So in an exam, I'm not yet going to do that kind of stuff. But some of you already reported that some of the practice exercises in the textbook are already doing those kind of shenanigans on you, right? They don't even tell you you need to write a constructor. Well, guess what? I need to write a constructor. I know that because Java wants a constructor in every class. So if I don't write a constructor, I get a default constructor. Now, would that be okay for me to have a default constructor here? Let me see. This is like how I'm going to think through, trying to determine if I need a constructor. A default constructor would put a 0 in a long. Yeah, that's okay. I can live with that. And it would put a null inside any attribute that is of a reference data type. A null in list. Okay, now I'm starting to have problem with that because I would assume that if I initialize my playlist, I want the constructor to create actually the array list that's going to contain the audiobooks. Even though that array list is empty right now, there is a difference between an empty array list and no array list at all, null. Okay? Same way there is a difference between an empty string, double quote, it's still a string object, and no string at all. I have null in the reference variable. So, okay, I convinced myself pretty much that I signed up for a constructor. So I'm going to write my constructor. You are going to write your constructor. how many arguments do we need for this constructor? Are we going to set the, the duration to a certain number to start off with? No. Am I going to receive an array list already all done for me? No, we're going to make it easy, okay? That would be harder to guess or to assume, okay? So I'm just going to give it to you like this. But, so we are left with a no-arg constructor, pretty much. And that no-arg constructor, its job is going to be setting total duration to 0 and creating the array list. Knowing that setting the total duration to 0, yes, it's already done automatically, we could do without it. So let's implement this real quick. And by let's, I mean you, of course. And then create for me an array list of the notebook object and put the reference in that object into the attribute list. Yes, but you don't need a parameter to your constructor. Your constructor is going to take 0 arguments, okay? And inside the constructor, you already did it, you set it to 0 your total duration. And then what I want you to do is I want you to create an object of class array list of position and put the address of that object into the attribute. So now that so you still need to remove that total duration parameter. And that's correct in the way that you use total duration equals 0. Now we need to initialize this. No, you still do it in the same constructor. Yeah. So you could say list equal or des.list equal, but you need to know that to you. And then you create an object that you can use. It would be great to have a lab for this course, so we can do more of this kind of stuff, okay? I don't understand why we don't have a lab for the Introduction to Programming course. So the best option for us to try to make up for the absence of a lab is student not hesitating to come into office hour and saying, hey, I'm working on this exercise, this practice exercise is not graded, but you know what, I don't know exactly how this is going, okay? But what some of you are experiencing right now is that, yes, it's when you do the stuff hands-on that you actually learn it the best, okay? So again, I apologize, we don't have an official lab session for this course, but we can definitely try to work together to make up for this, okay? So don't hesitate to come to office hours as well. So what we are dealing with here is the fundamental syntax, right, of creating objects. So first thing, I need a constructor. So I can deal with that without worrying too much about how to create objects yet, okay? So audiobook playlist, that's the name of the class. No arg, we discussed, I don't need arguments. Des.total duration equals 0. I could do without the des dot, okay? I'm just being over pedantic here. And des.list equals something semicolon, okay? Like everybody I've seen the screen of is having no problem with total duration. Then you're starting asking yourself question about the syntax for a release, so you forgot it a little bit. Let me refresh your memory. So you are still initializing an attribute. So the same way you said des.total duration equals blah, you're going to say des.list equals blah. And now what is blah? So blah in this case is going to be creating an object. What is the class of that object? Array list. Array list is a special class. It's a class that's called a generic class. So I always need to put the angular bracket after the name, okay? And then when I'm done, parentheses for the call to the constructor. How do you remember this? Well, if I add this dot something equal new string blah. That makes sense, right? You've seen that a ton of times. We have been doing stuff like that with simple classes, okay? So really the only thing that changed here is those angular brackets, okay? So it's just notation. Don't let that throw you off too much. So I have the angular brackets. I can use what is called the diamond operator to let Java figure out, hey, what kind of array list of something do I want to create? Or I can be specific again. In case of that, be over specific. That's not going to slow down your program or anything. It's just going to make it very clear. And for example, here I'm going completely off track. This is not, I don't want to make an array list of audiobook playlist. I want to make an array list of audiobook, okay? So I don't know if I told some of you your audiobook playlist because I was thinking about that, but if so, my apologies. Look here, this is an array list of audiobook, okay? All right, we have our two attributes. We have the constructor that takes care of assigning default value to the two attributes. Let's move on. All right, what do we have next? So now we have a few methods. So the most basic stuff we could do is create a class and then, try to display the content of that class on the screen. And to do that, we would do a system.out.println in the main, and we would ask that system.out.println to display the object itself by passing a reference to it. And that means that we need a toString method so that system.out.println receives from our object a string description of everything that's inside of it. So toString, we have been writing toString a bunch of time. So let's go, and let's go here, and let's add that toString. So it's going to be public string toString. Again, that was not given in the instruction. Well, it's because by now it's assuming you remember what toString is, okay? So when we talk about the method toString, it's going to be always that definition. So I gave you the definition. Now what about the code? Can you help me out there? So go ahead and try to implement the code for toString and ask me anything that comes to mind, any question that you have. That one is going to be a little longer. So some of you are using a for loop. So if you are still stuck at the beginning, yes, you're going to have to use a sort of loop, okay? Because what you want to do is you want to go through every element of our array list. You want to ask every one of those audiobook, give me a 2-string description of yourself. And you want to put them all together in a long string with backslashes, to go to the next line, and then that kind of good jazz. What kind of loop? It's up to you. If you're comfortable doing, index, do index. If you're comfortable doing for each, do for each. In the next exam, I might actually force you to do one way or the other. Just, because I need to test that you're okay with pretty much everything we cover in the class, okay? But generally speaking, by the final exam, if I don't put any requirement, in the instruction, it's up to you. Whatever you're comfortable with. Like it's kind of a pattern, okay? Like you would say, for example, that's why I use the temporary variable generally at 23 zone. Because everybody thinks, oh, okay, this is what I'm going to return at the end, right? Yeah. So you would say my result for now is an empty string. And then you have this whole loop that does whatever it has to do. You need to put the information inside the string result. And at the end, you have to return the result. So I'm going to start slowly filling the blanks while you guys are wrapping up, okay? So one of the things we talked about with one of your classmates was you don't have to do it that way, but it's very clean. You start with a temporary variable here of class string, and then you return it, okay? So even right now, like even for not doing anything, I could compile this. Okay, I could put here something, anything, compile it, and I could go ahead and start testing in the main, even though I don't have the main loop, okay? So while you guys are finishing wrapping up the loop, I'm going to go back up in the main, and I'm going to say, okay, I am ready to start testing that audiobook playlist. So I'm going to display testing the audiobook playlist. I'm going to create an object of class audiobook playlist. I don't have yet any method to add anything, so I'm going to comment those out. There we go. That's going to be my next goal, okay? And then all audiobook in the playlist, blah. And then the total duration, well, I don't have my accessor for total duration, my getter, so I'm going to comment this out. So I pick and choose what I want to run on my class based on what I have already implemented, and then the rest of the test here show me pretty much what I should be doing next, okay? So right now, this is going to be displaying the content of the playlist. Let's run it. There we go. That's not really great, but it's a start, okay? That means it compiles, and it's displaying whatever the variable result returned, which is just an arbitrary message. So now, how do we work this out? So every time you have to create like some sort of aggregated information about what's inside of a playlist, it's one of those patterns where you know you are going to iterate over every element of the playlist and get something from each of them. In this case, what do I want to get from each of them? I want to get their toString. I want to get their string description. What do I want to do with those? I want to concatenate them one after the other, like we've done in previous live coding example, in previous exercise. I want to concatenate them to one another and separate them, maybe with a \n, something like to skip a line to make it like pretty on the screen. So let's put that all together. How do I do my iteration, my for loop? I'm going to use a for each, just because this is the most recent stuff we introduced. So I want to kind of like give you some mileage with it before you have an exam. So I'm going to say for each audiobook A inside the playlist. What's the name of my playlist? List, the attribute list, okay? So for each audiobook A inside of the attribute list, which is an array list, what do I do? Result plus equal A dot toString. That would be the minimum. Okay, minimum is I concatenate them all one after the other. If I do that, I'm going to get a giant string that's going to fit in one line. It's not going to be really, really super readable. So what I'm going to do is add this. That part here, why don't I have to worry about it? Because I already did. We wrote it together last time, okay? We wrote it together last time. We implemented the toString method for audiobooks, for ebook, etc. So that's abstraction. That's encapsulation. Now that I know this job is done, now that I know that this class has a toString method, I just use the toString method, and I don't have to worry or try to remember. So how many attributes are in that class? I don't know. I don't remember what's in an audiobook, but I should not care because I'm writing another class right now. Okay, so I'm letting the class itself handle all of its attributes, give me what I want, which is a string description, and then move on. So if I try to compile this, hopefully that compiles. If I try to run it, it's still displaying the Y because I left it here. And if I remove it, well, it's going to be barely better because now it's displaying nothing. There's nothing here on the screen simply because I have nothing in my playlist. So now I need to test any further to even make sure that my for loop works. I need to work on the add method. So the add method, you're going to love it. It's going to be super easy. So what do we want to take as parameter? We want to take an audiobook. So I'm going to add a little bit of instruction here. Add a given audiobook object to list. Let's say that you're in a rush because you are taking an exam and you have only like 30 seconds to do that. So put yourself in that mindset. How would you write this in 30 seconds? No, it's going to be super simple. That's why I'm stressing, the 30 seconds. It's like, clear your mind. What is the simplest way for me to add an audiobook to my attribute list? Yeah, pretty much. Not plus, but list.add audiobook. Why is it so simple? Yeah? Oh. You can leave it as A. Very good question. Okay, so the question is here: do I need the toString? No, you don't need the toString. Most of the cases where you post a reference to an object and the context lets Java know that we need actually a string in that context, Java will be smart enough to call toString on its own. Okay, very good question. So going back to what was suggested here for our add method, public. So I'm going to say it's void add because I was not told anything else. Okay, we are going to see that this is going to change very soon. Void add, and then I take as parameter an audiobook A. And then what do I have to do here? So my list attribute is where I store all of the audiobook. So list something. List.add. Why can I write list.add? Because the data type of list is an array list of audiobooks. What does the array list comes with? A ton of stuff. Add, contains, stuff like that, right? So now that I know list is an array list, if you ask me to do something, or if I can come to the conclusion that I want to add this audiobook to list, then my brain goes immediately to, okay, what can list do for me? And bookmark, your textbook, whatever, look at the table that enumerate all the method. In this case here, I can say list.add and add an audiobook, and that's the end of it. How would I now make it so that every time I add an audiobook to my playlist, I take the duration of that audiobook and I add it to the total duration attribute. Total duration plus equal. What would go here now? Bingo. A.get duration. How do I figure this out? Where is the information I'm looking for? It's in A. It's in the audiobook. What is the data type of A? Audiobook class. I'm going to go look into the audiobook class. What kind of method do I have that are public that I could use here that I could get me the information I want? I scroll through the class, I find get duration, I'm happy. That's it. 2 lines of code. Very simple. We are relying on the fact that other classes abstract and encapsulate features for us. And now we're to the point where we are playing Lego. We are putting everything together in blocks, and we are calling whatever we need in each object. Pretty neat. All right. So we add the add method. What else do we need? We need a toString. We need to add. I think all we have left is a get total duration, which would be actually an accessor. So I set 30 seconds for toString because I wanted to force you to think, how can I get it done as simply as possible? It's always a good way to think during an exam, okay? How can I get it done as simply as possible? Get total duration. So that one I'm not going to even break the flow here. I'm just going to give it to you, right? It's public, long, get, I think it's get total duration actually. Get total duration. It's an accessor. So these things you need to be able to write in your sleep, okay? Get total duration. There's no trick, the instruction didn't say anything special. Yeah?
And for the A.get duration, we're not going to have that because it's not another.
Okay, I should double check that the name here, A.get duration, that the name of the method is actually get duration. Good point. No, that one is going to come later. But I'm looking in the class audiobook. There we go. And I'm finding get duration. Yep, no, it's there. See, we're calling get duration on an object which is an audiobook.
Yeah,
so I just check the audiobook class, and if I have get duration, then I'm happy. But eventually, yes, we're going to get total duration by narrator, but that's going to be our job. It's not there yet. So accessor for the class. Let's compile it. So return total duration. So I forgot the name of the attribute here. Where was it? Private long total duration. So get total duration. This. No, I don't need this. So what is it? Cannot find symbol. Total duration. Yes, thank you. All right, this is a good day. All right, so thank you for that. So I was trying to call the method total duration instead of using the attribute total duration. All right, now it's compiling. Let's run it. Still nothing, but if I go back to the main, if I remember correctly, I have been commenting out, the calls to add, because I didn't have anything pretty much. I didn't have an add method, and I also commented out the call to get total duration because I didn't have it yet. But now I have all that stuff, so let's play. Let's try to compile it. Let's try to run it. So the total duration is 864 minutes. That's already good. That means something was added. Let's do the math real quick. 450, 404. So that's 854, 854 and 10, 864. Okay, that sounds good. We have 3 audiobooks. They are listed here in the order that I added them. Everything is working out. Okay? How did that go so far? Thumbs up if it was, like either like a good speed for you, or like good speed, like this, or like trivial. Okay, cool. What about anybody found that too fast? It's a decent pace. To give you an expectation, okay, for the exam, it's a decent pace. In an exam, I would expect you go just a little bit faster because you don't have to pause every 5 minutes to listen to me talk and stuff like that, okay? But these are like the basic operation that we have been already rehearsing several times. They need to come to you fast. So this is your expectation for as you practice for the exam. You want to reach that level before Friday, okay? All right, what do we have next? Let's jump back to the beginning of the file. So now we want to create another class. So again, add the class at the end of your file. Go ahead, get started right now, okay? This is the name of the class. You are free to change the name of the class to something else. I just didn't have any good idea here. But I called it Promax Audiobooks Playlist. We are going to inherit from this class, Audiobooks Playlist. And that should be actually specified in the instruction. So I'm going to add it right now. That inherits from audiobooks playlist. All right. What we want to do is we want to be everything an audiobook playlist is. So that ability, to convert yourself to a toString, that ability to add audiobooks, and every time you add the audiobooks, you keep track, of the total duration in an attribute. All of this, I want it all. I want to inherit it from the superclass. And then I want to add 2 methods. One that's going to be called toString by narrator. So this is totally a custom method, okay? What is it going to return? They didn't even tell me what it's going to return. What do you think? String, yeah, I heard it. Because it's a toString method, right? The name itself tells us pretty much what it's going to do. So toString by narrator. So what does a toString method do in the superclass? It goes over every element and put them all in a giant string. Well, this one says toString by narrator. Same, but just with audiobooks from the specified narrator. Okay, so I'm still going to have a loop. But now, for each element inside my array list, I'm going to check who is the narrator for that element. And if the narrator is, and this is when I realize I need an argument. Okay, you have to tell me who is the narrator that you want me to search for in the list. So if the narrator of the current audiobook object is the one that you pass as parameter, then yes, I want to add the duration. I want to add the description of that audiobook to the list. And then at the end, I return the stuff. So start a new class. It doesn't have any new attributes. And start like a toString, pretty much method inside of it as soon as you are done. So toString by narrator in this case, sorry. Yeah, toString by narrator, not toString, sorry about that. So I'm just going to put the layout of the blanks that we're going to fill, okay? That's as much as I can write without trying to think too hard. So yeah, the first question was, hey, are we supposed to extend here? I told you I was not thinking too hard, right? Oh, no, sorry. Do you have one classifier or that would be yeah, probably. That would be. But granted, the error message is not really helping you figure out this is the problem. It's one of those. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, sure. Yeah. That works.
So I'll be the same, actually the same
Yeah.
and so instead of saying, so centering here is non-valuable, but we're still comparable, then this thing okay. But then
Because you're like circling around like a king in your problem.
yeah.
So you're doing things there. So yeah, you want to use the list. Because this is where everything is stored. So I usually keep the list, I don't do it. Right?
So then now the narrator part says the plan with that per se.
So if you only do any of the streets there in the reference, so now that you got the phone that say I'm going to go over every repeated page. Okay? When you have one of the group, you can actually everything that's the string, of course. You can also try to search the narrator, right? Is there any problem with using the narrator? Well, no, I'm not trying to convince you there's no problem. I'm trying to put like, this is what I would think, if I was writing that. And you might have actually, if you have a problem, you just have to overcome it, right? So yeah, you may bump into problems when you are trying to implement this. We're going to see that together, okay? But that's the point. Try to work out fine. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So what are the two reasons? Or so pick whichever you want, and I'm going to point you in one direction. Actually, I think that's what it's here. Yeah. So let's take a look at it together here. So I just added the extend audiobooks playlist. Okay. Now I want to fill in the blanks here. So I'm going to start with what I had in the toString from my superclass, which was something like audiobook for each audiobook A inside list. Okay. I want to do something. In this case, the something that I need to do is going to be a little bit more, how to say, complicated than just result plus equal A dot, and I think we have a toString here. Yeah, we have a toString. So again, I don't have to call it explicitly, okay? But right now, I just, right now I did something really weird, which is I just cut and pasted, my toString from the superclass. It's just because I know the structure is going to be the same. Now, I don't want a list of everything that is in my playlist. I want to check if that element is by the same narrator that you gave me as parameter, then I add it. Otherwise, I just keep it. Okay? What's the simplest way to write this? If something is true, add it. If not, don't do anything for that element. If A dot, and then the question here is, do I have get narrator? If I have get narrator, then perfect. Okay. If I don't have get narrator, then I'm going to have to write a dot narrator, and I'm going to have to hope that I can access it. Okay. So let's assume I have a dot get narrator. So it's supposed to return to me a string, and I want to test that this string is equal to the narrator you gave me as parameter. Okay. And now we're going to bump into trouble. So let me try to compile this. First problem. So before even we check if I have get narrator, okay, which I honestly don't remember. First problem, list. What is it telling me? List has private access. So it's not because you inherit it that you can mess with it. So yes, I inherit list, I have access, but it's private. Yep.
So can you change it to protected?
Yes, I would have to. So there are two options to us, okay, offered to us. One is I go here, and I think this is actually the best option. I go here and I say, you know what, this list, since my subclasses are going to have to do more work on the list, I'm going to make it protected. If I do this, that compilation error goes away. And by the way, we do have apparently get narrator, so we are okay. The other alternative is what? Write an accessor, a getter, for the list. So something like get list, get playlist, in the superclass, make it public, or make it protected if you want. It's up to you. And then in the subclass, I'm going to be able to access that accessor, pretty much, that getter method. Okay. Either way, right now we have all the pieces together, I think. So we are going to go back up here, make sure we increment the test for that new class. So I have already everything I need to construct it. I have, actually, do I have a constructor? I don't have a constructor, so that means I have a default constructor that's going to call the superclass constructor with no argument. Everything works. I am going to add a bunch of audiobooks. I am going to say, here are all the audiobooks narrated by that specific narrator. Here's my call to the toString by narrator, and then get total duration by narrator. I didn't write this one yet. This is the second one that's asked of me in the instruction. I'm going to save. I'm going to build. I'm going to run it, and let's see if we have anything that's like even remotely correct. So the first thing is I display the entire playlist. Okay, so there are my 3 books. Then I write code to create another playlist. That one has more books. That one has 5 or 6 books, something like that. And then I ask for the list of all the audiobooks that were narrated by Anakin. And that's what I get. So it seems to be working, okay? Seems to be working. The narrator name here and here certainly confirms that. And that's it. I'm done with this. What is the next step? The next step, I'm going to let you finish it up as an exercise or whatever between now and the next session. Get duration by narrator. So my superclass has a get total duration. Okay? And get total duration is just an accessor. But the real work, I do it when I add an element. When I add an element, I just make sure that the duration of that audiobook is added to the attribute total duration. Okay. Now I want to do things differently. I'm not going to maintain a list of the total duration for each possible narrator. So I'm just going to let my list, grow. And when you add an element to the list, I don't pay attention to who is the narrator. But then later on, if you ask me, oh, by the way, I want to know the total duration of all the audiobook by that specific narrator, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my playlist. I'm going to look at every element of the playlist. And guess what? This sounds very familiar, right? So it's going to be almost exactly the same thing than what I just did for the toString by narrator. But instead of constructing a giant string, what I want to do is I just want to accumulate the value of the duration of all the audiobooks by that narrator into a variable and then return it. So again, it's going to be really, really straightforward. You're going to see it even if you don't see it right now. When you finish it, it's going to be very similar to the toString by narrator. Okay? All right. It's 43. We are going to close here. I'm not running anywhere, so if you have questions, please don't hesitate. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. I'm assuming to the end, yeah, okay. Give me 1 second. This one? Awesome.
Are you going to post
The code?
IE3.2?
Am I going to post the what, sorry?
Practice IE from last year?
No, not this time. This is why we had this session. We did it this way. I'm trying to merge together the last live coding that we do before, the IE, with the practice IE that I release, so that I can actually see in class people working on that IE and get an idea of the problems that you guys encounter. Okay?